Welcome back to Carman's Crypt. I'm Carman Carrion. Tonight we're doing something a little different. Over the past year, I've told you stories about monsters in the woods, creatures lurking in forgotten places, and terrors that hunt in the dark. But there's a particular kind of horror that seems to haunt listeners long after the episode ends. It's not the monsters in distant forests that keep you awake. It's the ones that find their way inside. So tonight, I'm unlocking the vault to bring you 5 stories that all share one terrifying truth. Your home isn't as safe as you think it is. From basements that hide unspeakable things, to dog doors that let in more than your pet, to wet footprints that appear where they shouldn't. These are the tales that made listeners check their locks twice and sleep with the lights on. Some of you have heard these before. Some of you are about to discover why these particular nightmares refuse to stay buried. Either way, I suggest you make sure your doors are locked before we begin, because once something finds its way inside, it's already too late. Let's start with a question that every child has asked at least once in their life. What's really down in the basement? Welcome, restless souls, to Carman's Crypt. I'm Carman Carrion, keeper of forgotten tales and curator of nightmares. You've wandered into my domain, where each week I unearth a fresh horror from the depths of human imagination. In these darkened halls, stories wait like hungry shadows. Each tale we've collected whispers of terrors both ancient and new. From crumbling mansions where something skitters behind the walls, to that strange text message you received at 3 a.m. from a number that shouldn't exist. So gather close. The candles are lit, the shadows grow long, and the witching hour is upon us. Are you prepared to face what lurks in the darkest recesses of Carman's Crypt? Lock your doors, still your nerves, and remember, here, every fear comes to life. This is Carman's Crypt. Your sanctuary of scares awaits. Tonight's story comes from listener Masked Rider Chris, who crafted a tale of cosmic horror and inherited guilt that'll stick with you long after the lights go out. Content warning for themes of mental health and family trauma. This is I Don't Want to Go Down to the Basement. There's something down there. The apartment, my family, me, my parents, and my little sister spent my childhood and teenage years in was a big red brick monster. It had a basement 3 stories below our apartment that was stifling in the summertime and frigid in the winter. If I'd had my way, I would have had a drum kit down there to jam on, but the neighbors would have killed us, even though we got along just fine with them, except for the people who lived downstairs from us, a mother and daughter. The daughter was nice. My sister and I got along with her. It was the mother who was the problem. It was always something with her mother, who was a loud, seemingly always angry sort. We often heard their vicious arguments coming up in angry metallic ghost whispers through our radiator pipes at night. We couldn't usually make out what they were saying, but boy, were they mad about something. It always got back to us that she talked trash about us behind our backs, and she always gave us stink eye whenever we met in person. Both our parents worked and we kids were usually left to ourselves, but we were always told one thing, very firmly, by both our parents. Do not go into the basement unsupervised. We just looked at them, nodded, and smiled, and left it at that. Something about how the old lady downstairs didn't want us in there, and given how mean she was, we listened. We didn't like her either, so it worked for us. The summer I turned 18, however, I got it into my head that I was grown, and I could do whatever I wanted to. Besides, who cared what that old bat downstairs thought anyway? She was obviously crazy. I decided I was going to see what the big deal was about. One humid Friday in mid-July, when the folks were at work and my sister was out, I slowly unlocked the kitchen door that led downstairs. I paused on the worn kitchen floor, taking in the sunlight streaming through the window. Something told me to enjoy these normal things while I could, because something huge was about to happen. I descended the old wooden stairs, hand on the banister, apprehension building in my gut. The basement door had cracking white paint, a deadbolt, and a wired window. I undid the deadbolt and eased it open. The basement had a concrete floor with wood slat storage cubicles along the walls. Sunlight dappled the slats as dust and mustiness tickled my nose. Without warning, I sneezed loudly. A faint shuffling noise came from nearby, and my heart nearly stopped. I heard soft hissing, which was enough to send me retreating upstairs quickly. I quietly slunk upstairs to the safety of our apartment and retreated to my room to crank my stereo. A good dose of Motorhead always cured what ailed me, and Dr. Rock soon had me headbanging joyfully. When my sister got home, she stuck her head in my room and rolled her eyes at her hopelessly uncool big brother's antics. It wasn't until I flagged her down that she stopped. She knew I was serious when I actually stopped the record player to talk to her. The look on her face when I told her what I'd done was priceless, because it was just such a perfect look of shock. Mind you, we got along well enough. She was, however, at the age where it was mandated she acted otherwise in public. Naturally, she had a clean-cut jock boyfriend with a bright future in football. Never mind that a deaf man could hear how fake he was when sucking up to our parents. Of course, he thought I was a loser with questionable sexuality. At 16, she was their bright star of hope, and I'd be lying if I said she didn't work that angle at times to her full advantage. Unlike me, who aspired to being the next Lemmy Kilmister, to conquer the world armed with a bass guitar slung around my neck. Never mind the fact that I was a straight arrow whose worst traits were his long hair and a band t-shirt collection. I was the screw-up in their eyes. But that's neither here nor there. My sister stared at me in shock, then sputtered out, "Are you serious? You actually went down there? What did you see?" When I told her, and she seemed disappointed at first, it inevitably came down to, "You're not going to go down there again, are you? I won't tell on you, but come on. You don't know what's down there. It could be anything." When I told her I was going to, she sighed and said, "I don't know nothing. I still think you need to stay out of there, but..." She trailed off and left my room, shaking her head. I went to bed with my mind whirling, keen to see how much further I could push it. The next time I went down, I heard soft shuffling from one of the storage closets, which had a large new padlock. I peeked through the slats and could have sworn I saw something. I drew back with a gasp and hurried out. Sunday dragged on with anticipation building. When I finally fell asleep, I had creepy dreams that woke me with a stifled cry. A high-pitched, distorted voice had said something like, "Mommy," that woke me up shivering. Monday, I was surprised to find the basement door unlocked. I slipped inside to be greeted by the crazy downstairs neighbor lady. "What are you doing down here? Get out! You don't see anything." Her voice carried its usual harsh anger, but also desperation. As we stood there, I noticed two things. She had a sack with wet red spots, and I heard wordless whimpering from the corner. Frantic banging started where the closets were. She stepped up to me and snarled, "You don't know nothing, got it?" I nodded and rushed out, but I crept back to put my ear to the door. I heard her talking to someone in a sweet, loving tone I'd never heard before. "I'm sorry, sweetie. That bad boy is gone now. It's just you and me now. Mommy loves you." What made me shudder was the response, a weird voice that sounded like a person imitating a cat. Even after another night of scary dreams that woke me often, I went back down to the basement once I was alone the following day. I was deranged from lack of sleep and driven by something in my mind compelling me into who knew what. The next I knew, I was making my way to the little closet in the corner. I didn't hear anything this time, but I still slowed down as I got closer. My heart was pounding hard enough that I thought whatever was in there could probably hear it clearly. I paused in front of the door, breath catching in my throat, my ribs vibrating with every heartbeat. As I peered between the slats, I glimpsed something pale, lying still, and I smelled feces and urine. It smelled like something had crawled up someone's ass and died. I saw what looked like someone's back turned towards me, with vertebrae poking through to an unhealthy degree. Someone's skin and bones, like a Holocaust survivor. I gasped, and the next thing I knew, a pair of jaundiced eyes were staring into mine. My terror was intense as I heard that same weird voice I had been hearing in my dreams. "Hello, friend." I thought I'd known what loneliness was, being an outcast was, but I heard more loneliness and sadness in those two words than I'd ever known in my young life. Something in the voice of this poor guy, thing, whatever it was, awakened sympathy in my heart. I finally found my own voice after a few seconds stammering. Yeah, friend." I was nearly whispering, in awe of what was happening. "Yeah, friend." "Good. Need. Friend." I even felt tears stinging my eyes as it said what it said next. "I like friend." Something in that voice just made me realize how petty my feelings of being left out by my peers were in the grand scheme of things. Here I was with a good life in comparison. I got to come and go as I pleased. I had food and clothes, records, a bass guitar, a room of my own, and a roof over my head that wasn't musty bare concrete. This poor guy didn't have any of that. I thought of Mary Shelley's Creature, and it hit me that this guy was a real outsider and outcast. "Hey man, what's your name?" I spoke quietly and gently. "Name?" It sounded uncertain, as though the concept was new to him. Yeah. You have a name, right? Everybody has a name." I was surprised when he repeated the same word. Did this guy even not have a name? I thought for a second, then said, "Hey, can I call you Frank?" Short for Frankenstein, of course, knowing full well as a movie buff that it was the same name of the doctor, not the creature. Hey, it was the first thing that came to mind. "Frank. Yes, I like Frank." That weird voice came through the wood. I found myself smiling in spite of myself, because whoever this guy was, he didn't seem all bad. He just wanted someone to talk to. It hit me right then, though, that I'd best get back upstairs before I was caught again. "Listen, Frank, I gotta go now, but want me to come back and visit you again? Is that okay?" Frank's voice cracked with emotion as he replied to me, "Yes, please come back." I forced a lump out of my throat before I could speak. "I will, man. See you again soon, Frank, but don't tell anybody I was here, okay? I'm kinda not supposed to be here." "Okay," Frank said, sounding happy. Back in my room, it hit me that this was something big. I knew that this was something I had to keep to myself, even if it meant that poor Frank only had one friend in the world. The next couple of weeks were interesting, to say the least. The days I got to spend time with Frank were marked by being amazed at how naive about the world he was. Talking to him was like talking to an overgrown toddler sometimes, but he was so eager to listen to me that I cut him all the slack. I told him about my music, about girls, about pretty much everything I could think of. He eagerly listened, and it was gratifying. You see, apparently she was his mother, and judging from what little Frank told me about her, she was crappy to him. Mind you, he had no idea about, the birds and the bees. He just knew she was his mother. He implied that she talked down to him and kept him in a state of arrested development for God only knew what reasons. He also said she often slapped him around and screamed at him, and he couldn't fathom why. I started getting angrier about it over time. He had no idea who his father was, but he mentioned having awful dreams about something watching over him that scared him badly, something that didn't sound normal or natural at all, based on what little he told me. This made me think, was his father even human? Part of me thought, had to have been, because who would want to get with her? As soon as that thought crossed my mind, a shiver went up and down my spine, and I put it aside instantly. But it kept coming back to haunt me at the worst times. It made me feel like I knew about something that I was never meant to know about. Everything changed one morning when I woke from a nightmare and headed downstairs to mayhem in the basement. I heard the crazy lady ranting and blows landing, then Frank's heartbreaking whimpering. "You aren't even supposed to exist! You don't have friends! Who would want to be your friend, you freak?" That was it. I ran across the basement, grabbed her arm, and dragged her away from Frank's cubicle. She started hitting me, and I fought back until something clocked me hard in the head. As she beat me down, an inhuman screech cut through my daze.
"Leave him alone!"
Suddenly, she was screaming in pain as Frank snarled like an angry animal. I heard wet, ripping noises that made my stomach turn, followed by a sickening burble and final thud. When my vision cleared, I saw Frank crouching by the body of the neighbor lady, who looked like she had been through a meat grinder. A girl's scream echoed from nearby, "My sister," and Frank hissed, sending her fleeing upstairs. Frank turned jaundiced, bulging eyes on me and a face only vaguely human. His unnaturally wide mouth was slathered with gore, full of too many sharp teeth. Long, greasy hair framed prominent cheekbones and flabby lips. Everything about his lanky, bony body was wrong. Eyes too round, mouth too wide, arms too long. There were withered fins on his limbs and atrophied webbing between his clawed fingers and toes. His skin was pale white, fading to unhealthy yellow on his back. "Friend, I like friend," he said, trying to smile. When Frank realized his only friend was frightened of him, the most intense hatred I'd ever seen took over his face. He glared at the dead body and started vigorously ripping into it with animalistic fury. I heard a car pull up outside, then heavy footsteps charging down to the basement door. "Sweet Jesus," a man's voice declared. Frank looked up and snarled, blood dripping from his inhuman mouth, then was drowned out by deafening gunfire. After the shooting stopped, I saw Frank, full of holes, crawling toward me.
"Sorry, friend,"
he said, with such sadness that I was overcome with grief. A policeman moved in to finish him with a point-blank headshot, and I went into shock. I came to in a hospital bed with my family by my bedside. When they left the room, a man entered. "I'm Agent Tompkins from the FBI. That subject you saw down there does not exist. You did not see anything. You are not to discuss it with anybody. If you say anything to anybody, we will know about it, and there will be damage control. Do you understand?" His voice was flat and matter-of-fact. I just nodded. He was middle-aged, ordinary, graying hair, dark suit, but something about his eyes made me shiver before he walked silently out. Months passed before I could wrap my head around what had happened. Then came the day when the crazy lady's daughter came to see me and told me she didn't hold anything against me. I heard her out since I had no problems with her. She told me that she had argued with her mother numerous times about putting the poor guy out of his misery since he was so deformed. But her mother had always vehemently denied that option, something about how it was her responsibility to take care of him. I know, she said, when I pointed out what I'd witnessed didn't qualify as taking care of Frank. Then she dropped the bomb. Her father had died when she was little, and she'd never known who fathered Frank, only that her mother had gotten pregnant again after going away on several occasions with a group of creepy people in dark clothing. She didn't remember much about them, but she did remember the night Frank was born. She remembered that her mother had given birth at home after a rough pregnancy, with the people in black overseeing the delivery. The screaming she'd heard from the bedroom that she'd been ejected from had scared her half to death. The noises of her little brother taking his first breaths had made her blood freeze. and she'd never forgotten her mother sobbing in horror and screaming, "Oh God, what have I done?" Frank had always been imprisoned in his room from day one. The first time she sneaked in to peek at him, she'd been stunned at what she saw. Her mother had tanned her hide for this, and she'd never done so again. The creepy folks in black had made it clear that she was staying there, like it or not, for otherwise she'd be shirking her duty, as they put it. She had lacked the courage to stand up to these sinister strangers, and she was frightened they'd come for her now. I blurted out, "Wouldn't they do that anyway now that Frank was dead?" "Oh, it will happen. They have ways of knowing things," she said with a shudder before excusing herself. I just sat there staring at my Metallica and Slayer posters for a while after that. To think that cults like that existed in the real world. H.P. Lovecraft had been onto something, I thought, as implications sank into my brain. Then it hit me like a brick. Was that guy in the suit really FBI? I abruptly recalled that he hadn't flashed a badge of any kind. Was he one of those men in black I'd heard about on the internet? That night, at 2 a.m., I heard her screaming through the radiator pipes.
"No! Oh God, no! Leave me alone!"
I charged to our front door and down to her apartment. Her door was ajar, and I saw several tall, gangling figures surrounding her. Her pajamas were shredded, leaving parts of her embarrassingly exposed. As they turned toward me, I noticed their clumsy movements and bulging clothes. Their faces looked more like fish than people. Wide mouths, bulging eyes, shark teeth, stringy hair, like Frank's. A familiar voice spoke from behind me. "You should have stayed in the bed, kid." The man in black pressed something hard against my skull. "It won't hurt. Much." I slowly turned, and he chuckled softly. "Don't be a hero. Just look at me." What I saw shut my brain down instantly. I came to in a fetal position as the sun lit the living room. The crazy lady's daughter was sitting on the sofa, grinning idiotically with glassy eyes. When we made eye contact, she giggled hideously, and I found myself joining her. We had both seen something not meant for human minds. The image of writhing black tentacles where a man's face should be assaulted my mind. We kept giggling, then laughing, then shrieking. That's how the police found us. I'm writing this down in my cell at the institution. I have mechanical pencils, and I've snapped and gone through numerous leads committing this paper. Papers I keep well hidden, since someone might get cute and swipe them. The doctors were able to restore my mind, mostly, but even with my medication, I can't unsee what I saw. I can't remember the last time my family visited, and maybe that's for the better. I have a sneaking suspicion that maybe the man in black visited my family after he was done with me. I don't want to know what might have happened to the crazy lady's daughter. Did I mention I can't unsee the things I saw at that apartment complex? Even with sleeping meds, the dreams come, and they won't stop. I keep hearing that evil chuckle and that cold, flat voice telling me that I saw something I wasn't meant to see. No joke, Sherlock. It made me realize that, yes, there really are things out there that we humans weren't meant to see or know about. We're better off being oblivious about them. I was no longer oblivious about this now. I'll spare you the other things, and things I saw in these dreams. I was all too aware about their all too real world now, that lurks at the outskirts of the world we humans think is so safe, good, and solid. Hell no, the world we need to worry about is the one we conveniently ignore, even though it's right under our noses. The world full of unspeakable things that will strike us raving mad if even a glimpse of them is caught by one of us humans. The dreams happen every night, and the worst part is these sleeping meds are so strong that I can only wake up when they finally wear off after the eternity of every night on them. I can't not take them either. They make sure I take them no matter what here. Even though these people mean well, They just don't get it. They nod, smile, and pat me on the head, but I can tell they don't believe me. They're too busy thinking I'm too crazy to know what I'm talking about. But I know better. I can't take it anymore. There's only one thing that will end this, I hope, though the man in black disagrees with me. In the dreamscapes, he opens up for me every night so he can torment me from wherever he is. He says it's a futile idea. I've found my way to the end of this torture. As soon as I finish writing this, I'm finally going to be free of this nightmare. Will I really be tormented by the man in black forever? One way to find out. If there's an afterlife, let's hope that it's well away from the world that they inhabit. It's bedtime now. Good night, world. Good night, my life. Here's to hoping that I'm right about this. Wish me luck. Something tells me I'm going to need it. Sometimes the most terrifying moments happen not in the dark corners of abandoned buildings or ancient graveyards, but in the supposed safety of our own homes. Today's story comes from a listener who learned that the barriers we trust to keep danger out can become the very portals that let it in. This is the tale of a mother, a child, and a dog door that became something far more sinister than intended. Carla had always been afraid of the dark. It wasn't something she liked to admit, especially as a grown woman with a toddler to protect. But there it was, a fear that had followed her from childhood like a persistent shadow. The incident that started it all had been simple enough. A neighbor boy peering through her bedroom window when she was 8 years old. Nothing violent happened, nothing overtly threatening, but the violation of that safe space, the knowledge that someone could be watching from the darkness outside, had planted a seed of unease that never quite left her. So when she and her then husband Brendan bought the century-old Victorian on Elm Street, Carla had to constantly reassure herself about every creak, every groan, every mysterious thump in the night. The house was beautiful, all original hardwood floors, intricate crown molding, and tall windows that let in streams of golden afternoon light. But it was also old, with all the quirks and sounds that came with a structure that had weathered 100 years of seasons. It's just the house settling, she would whisper to herself when the floorboards above their bedroom would creak at 2 a.m., even though no one was upstairs. It's just the old-growth oak scraping the roof, she'd mutter when sharp scratching sounds would drag across the shingles during windstorms. It's just the radiant heating, she'd insist when the pipes would clank and bang like someone was trapped inside the walls, desperately trying to get out. The backyard gate was another source of constant anxiety. No matter how many times Brendan fixed the latch, adjusted the hinges, or added new hardware, the thing simply would not stay closed. Carla would lie awake listening to it clank and bang, and even the slightest breeze, metal on metal, creating an irregular rhythm that sounded almost like Morse code, as if someone was trying to send her a message she couldn't understand. Their dog, Ranger, was a 60-pound golden retriever mix with a perpetually optimistic disposition and an unfortunate tendency to bolt whenever the opportunity presented itself. The previous owners had installed a large dog door in the back entrance to accommodate their German Shepherd, and Brendan had never gotten around to replacing it with something more appropriately sized. It was, Carla often thought, ridiculously oversized for their needs. Large enough for a person to crawl through if they were determined enough. But Ranger loved his freedom, and 3-year-old Danny loved watching the dog come and go, so the door stayed. Carla pushed down her unease about the security implications. After all, they lived in a good neighborhood, with decent people and well-maintained yards. What could go wrong? The divorce was as amicable as these things could be. Brendan wasn't a bad man. They had simply grown into different people who wanted different things. He took an apartment across town, and in the custody arrangement, he also took Ranger. Carla had insisted on it, actually. Single parenting was challenging enough without adding a large, energetic dog to the equation, and besides, Ranger had always been more Brendan's dog anyway. The house felt different without them both. Larger, emptier. The creaks and groans that had once seemed like normal settling now echoed through rooms that felt too spacious for just two people. Danny, bless his resilient little heart, adapted quickly to the new normal. He missed his father and the dog, but at 3 years old, his world was still small enough that Mommy's presence could fill most of the void. Carla, however, found herself lying awake more often, listening to the sounds she couldn't identify. Was that the gate again? Was it just the wind? She'd always been a type B personality, disorganized, spontaneous, willing to let small problems slide until they became bigger ones. The phone charger that was never where she left it, the mail that piled up on the kitchen counter, the dog door that she kept meaning to board up or replace, but somehow never got around to. It was a Thursday evening in late September when everything changed, and by the time Carla got Danny fed and settled on the living room couch for his nightly movie, currently an endless rotation of Disney films that she could practically recite from memory, dusk was already painting the windows purple. They were 20 minutes into Finding Nemo when her phone died. The little white apple logo appeared, flickered, and then went black. Carla sighed, pausing the movie. "Mommy's phone is broken, buddy. I need to go charge it in the kitchen. You keep watching, okay?" Danny nodded absently, thumb in his mouth, eyes glued to the colorful fish on the screen. Carla padded to the kitchen in her socked feet, scanning the counter for the white charging cord that seemed to migrate around the house of its own accord. She found it lying near the coffee maker and crossed to the outlet by the window to plug it in. That's when the feeling hit her. It started as a prickle at the base of her neck, like tiny ice crystals forming on her skin. Then came the goosebumps, raising the fine hairs on her arms until they stood at attention. Her stomach dropped as if she'd missed a step on a staircase, and a cold weight settled in her chest. The unmistakable sensation that something was very, very wrong. Carla's hands trembled as she plugged in the cord, her body responding to a threat her mind hadn't yet identified. She looked up from the outlet, following her instincts, and peered through the kitchen window into the backyard. The gate was open again. That wasn't unusual. But there, in the center of the small patch of grass, someone was sitting cross-legged like a child at story time. They wore a dark hoodie, pulled up despite the mild evening, and dark sunglasses despite the fading light. They were facing the house, facing her, and they were completely, unnaturally still. Carla's rational mind tried to process what she was seeing. Maybe it was a teenager playing a prank. Maybe it was someone who was lost or confused. Maybe it was just a homeless person who had wandered into the wrong yard and would leave when they realized someone lived here. But the longer she watched, the more wrong it felt. The figure didn't shift or fidget the way people do when they're sitting on the ground. They didn't look around or check their phone or show any signs of normal human restlessness. They just sat, still as a mannequin, staring directly at the kitchen window where Carla stood. Carla stepped closer to the window, thinking maybe the person hadn't seen her yet. Maybe making her presence known would encourage them to leave. But as she moved into clearer view, the hooded figure remained motionless. If anything, the stillness seemed more pointed now, more deliberate, as if they were making sure she knew they saw her seeing them. Her hands shaking, Carla backed away from the window and grabbed her dead phone, jabbing at the power button uselessly. She needed to call the police. She needed to call someone, but the phone remained stubbornly black. Moving as quietly as she could, Carla crept to the back door and turned the deadbolt. The metallic click seemed abnormally loud in the quiet house. She tested the handle to make sure it was secure, then remembered with a sinking heart that a locked door meant nothing when there was a dog-sized hole cut into it at ground level. The dog door. The stupid, oversized dog door that she'd been meaning to fix for months. Carla grabbed her phone and charger and hurried to the dining room where her laptop sat open on the table. Her fingers fumbled over the keys as she opened Facebook Messenger, scrolling frantically through her contacts for anyone who might be online. Her sister in California. It would be early evening there. Perfect. Lisa, she typed, not caring about caps lock. Someone is sitting in my backyard staring at my house. My phone is dead. If you don't hear from me in 5 minutes, call the police. 1247 Elm Street. The 3 dots appeared immediately. Then Lisa's response. OMG, calling cops now. Are you safe? Can you see them? Door locked but big dog door. Carla typed back. Going to check if still there. From the living room, Danny called out. Mommy, where are you? Coming, baby. Carla called back, trying to keep her voice normal. She looked at her phone. Still dead. She had plugged it in, but it would take a few minutes to get enough charge to turn on. She needed to know if the person was still there. Maybe they'd gotten bored and left. Maybe this was all just a bizarre misunderstanding that would make a funny story later. Carla dropped to her hands and knees and crawled toward the kitchen, staying below the window line. The tile was cold against her palms, and she felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad horror movie. But the feeling of wrongness hadn't left her. If anything, it was getting stronger. She reached the kitchen and slowly raised her head to peek over the windowsill. The hooded figure was gone from the center of the yard. Carla felt a moment of relief. Maybe they had finally left. But as her eyes adjusted to the deepening twilight, she realized with a cold shock that they hadn't left at all. They had moved closer, much closer. They were now sitting directly outside the back door, less than 3 feet from where Carla crouched. The dark sunglasses were pointed straight at the window, as if they had known exactly where she would look, as if they had been waiting for her. Carla and the watcher stared at each other through the glass. The person made no move to leave, no gesture of acknowledgement, no sign that they understood they were trespassing. They simply sat and watched, their face an unreadable mask behind the dark lenses. And then, slowly and deliberately, they raised one hand and pointed at the dog door. Carla scrambled backward from the window, her heart hammering against her ribs. She fumbled for her phone, nearly crying with relief when the screen flickered to life with just enough battery to make a call.
911, what's your emergency?
There's someone in my backyard, Carla whispered, trying to keep her voice low so Danny wouldn't hear. They're just sitting there staring at my house and they won't leave.
Ma'am, I need you to speak up. Are you in immediate danger?
Carla pressed the phone closer to her mouth. Someone is trespassing in my backyard. I'm alone with my 3-year-old son. They've been there for several minutes and they're not responding when they can clearly see me.
Okay, ma'am. I'm dispatching officers to your location. Can you give me your address?
Carla rattled off the address, her voice getting steadier as she talked to the calm professional dispatcher.
Are your doors locked?
Yes, but... Carla hesitated. How do you explain to a 911 operator that your locked door has a large hole in it? There's a dog door. It's big. Someone could crawl through it if they wanted to.
I understand. Officers are about 5 minutes out. I'm going to stay on the line with you. Can you see the person now?
I need to check.
Okay, but be very careful. Don't put yourself in danger.
Carla crawled back toward the window, phone pressed to her ear. She could hear the dispatcher breathing, a comforting reminder that she wasn't alone in this. Slowly, she raised her head to look outside. The figure was still there, still in the same position by the door. But now they seemed to be looking right at her, as if they'd been tracking her movement through the house. The dark sunglasses reflected the kitchen light, making it impossible to see their eyes. But Carla had the disturbing sense that they were amused by her fear. They're still there. She whispered into the phone.
Officers will be there soon. I want you to stay away from windows and doors. Is there a room in the house where you can lock yourself and your son in?
Carla thought about it. The upstairs bathroom had a lock, but she'd have to carry Danny up a flight of stairs that creaked loudly enough to wake the dead. If someone did come through the dog door, they'd hear exactly where she was going. "Mommy!" Danny called from the living room, his voice carrying that particular tone that meant he was getting worried. "Where are you? I can't see Nemo." "I'll be right back, honey," Carla called out, trying to sound normal. "Mommy's just talking to someone." She was about to tell the dispatcher about the bathroom when she heard it, a sound that made her blood freeze in her veins. The slow, deliberate squeak of the dog door's hinges. The dog door made a very specific sound when something passed through it. Carla had heard it thousands of times. The soft brush of fur against plastic, the quick squeak thump as the flap swung both ways. Ranger had his own rhythm when he used it, a confident push-through that made the door swing wildly before settling back into place. This was different. This was slow, deliberate, as if someone was testing it, seeing how much noise it would make, how much space they had to work with. Squeak, pause, squeak, pause.
Ma'am, are you there?"
The dispatcher's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Someone's coming through the dog door," Carla whispered, the words barely audible even to herself.
"What? Can you repeat that?"
"They're coming inside," Carla said more loudly, panic finally overtaking her need for stealth. "Someone is crawling through the dog door."
"Ma'am, I need you to grab your son and get to a secure room immediately. Officers are 2 minutes away."
Carla dropped the phone and ran to the living room, where Danny was sitting exactly where she'd left him, still watching fish swim across the television screen, thumb in his mouth, completely oblivious to the nightmare unfolding just one room away. "Danny, baby, we need to go upstairs right now," Carla said, scooping him into her arms. "But Nemo!" "We'll finish it later. Right now we need to go." She could hear the dog door moving more frequently now, accompanied by other sounds, soft scraping noises, like fabric against the door frame, like someone working very hard to squeeze through an opening that wasn't quite big enough. Carla headed for the stairs, Danny's warm weight in her arms, when she heard something that stopped her cold. Laughter. Soft, breathy laughter coming from the kitchen. Someone was enjoying this. Every maternal instinct Carla possessed screamed at her to run. Not upstairs where they could be trapped, not to a bathroom where they could be cornered, but out of the house entirely, away from the dog door and the laughter and the person who thought terrorizing a mother and child was amusing. "Mommy, what's happening?" "We're going to visit the neighbors," Carla said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Just for a little while." She fumbled with the front door lock, her hand shaking so badly she could barely turn the deadbolt. Behind them, she could hear more sounds from the kitchen. Footsteps now, soft but unmistakable on the tile floor. Someone was definitely inside her house. The lock finally turned. Carla yanked the door open and ran across the front yard, leaving the door wide open behind her. Let the intruder have the house. Let them take whatever they wanted. Her only priority was getting Danny somewhere safe. The Hendersons across the street were having a dinner party. Carla could see warm light spilling from their windows, could hear the soft murmur of conversation and clinking glassware. Normal people having a normal evening, completely unaware of the horror unfolding 50 feet away. Carla pounded on their front door, Danny now crying from the sudden chaos and his mother's obvious fear. "Help! Please help!" She could hear the neighbor's dog barking on the other side of the door, and then the door opened to reveal Mrs. Henderson, a kind woman in her 60s who often waved from her garden. Her face immediately shifted from confusion to concern when she saw Carla's tears and Danny's frightened sobs. "Carla, my goodness, what's wrong?" "Someone broke into my house," Carla gasped. "They came through the dog door. I called 911, but come in immediately," Mrs. Henderson said, pulling them inside and quickly locking the door behind them. "Harold," she called to her husband, "cancel the dinner party. Carla needs our help." The next few minutes were a blur of kindness. The dinner guests quietly gathered their things and left through the back door, giving Carla and Danny space. Mrs. Henderson wrapped Danny in a soft throw blanket and turned on cartoons to distract him, while Mr. Henderson stood at the front window, keeping watch on Carla's house. "I can see the police cars coming," he announced. 2 of them, lights flashing. Carla felt some of the tension leave her shoulders, but she couldn't stop thinking about their cat, Whiskers, who had been sleeping somewhere in the house when she fled. The poor thing was probably hiding under a bed, terrified by the intrusion. Through the window, they watched as police officers approached her house with flashlights, moving carefully around the perimeter. Carla found herself holding her breath, wondering what they would find inside. 20 minutes later, one of the officers knocked on the Hendersons' door. Carla answered it with Danny on her hip, the little boy now calm but clingy. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm Officer Cooper. We apprehended someone on your property." "Is it safe to go home?" "Yes, ma'am, but I need to ask you some questions first. Can you describe what happened?" Carla recounted the entire incident while Danny dozed against her shoulder. The sitting figure in the yard, the pointing at the dog door, the sounds of someone crawling through it, the laughter. Officer Cooper took notes, his expression growing more serious as he spoke. "When we arrived, we found a woman sitting on your back porch. She was reaching through the dog door repeatedly like she was testing it. When we approached her, she didn't try to run. She just kept laughing and reaching through the door." Is she mentally ill?" "We're not sure yet. She won't speak to us except to laugh. But Mrs. Morrison, there's something else you should know." Carla's stomach tightened. "What?" "We found evidence that she's been on your property before, multiple times. There are cigarette butts behind your garden shed, and we found what looks like a makeshift seat, some boards arranged like a chair, hidden in the bushes by your back fence. It appears she's been watching your house for a while." The news hit Carla like ice water. All those nights she had heard sounds and dismissed them as normal house settling. The gate that never stayed latched, the feeling of being watched that she had attributed to new home anxiety. It hadn't been her imagination after all. "How long?" she whispered. "Hard to say. Could be weeks, could be months. We're going to need to process the scene and see what else we can find. Do you have somewhere you and your son can stay tonight?" Carla looked at Mrs. Henderson, who immediately nodded. "Of course, they can stay here. I'll need to go back and get some things for Danny, and our cat will escort you. But, Mrs. Morrison, I'd strongly recommend installing security cameras and doing something permanent about that dog door. What happened tonight? This person was planning something. We just don't know what yet." Carla never slept well in the house on Elm Street again, even after boarding up the dog door with heavy plywood, even after installing motion sensor lights and a security system, even after the police assured her that the woman, whose name she learned was Rebecca Marsh, had been charged with criminal trespass and was receiving mental health treatment. Carla couldn't shake the feeling of violation. Every night sound made her heart race. Every time the old house settled or heating pipes clanged, she found herself wondering if it was really just the house, or if someone else had found a way in. The knowledge that Rebecca had been watching them for months, learning their routines, planning something that was interrupted only by chance, made every shadow seem threatening. Danny, resilient as only children can be, bounced back quickly. He remembered the incident as the night we had a sleepover at Mrs. Henderson's house, and showed no lasting effects from the trauma. But Carla knew she couldn't continue living in a state of constant vigilance and fear. 3 months later, they moved to a brand new townhouse in a gated community. No dog door, no old-growth trees scraping the roof, no mysterious sounds that could be dismissed as house settling. Carla thought she would feel safer there, and she did. But she also learned something that night that she carried with her to the new house and beyond. The things we install to make our lives more convenient, pet doors, smart locks, automated systems, can become vulnerabilities if we're not careful. Home security isn't just about alarm systems and deadbolts. It's about thinking like someone who wants to get in and closing every possible avenue they might use. Most importantly, she learned to trust her instincts. All those months of dismissing strange sounds and unexplained incidents as normal home ownership had nearly led to disaster. Sometimes the things that go bump in the night really are just old houses settling. But sometimes they're not. And sometimes the most frightening realization is that the call was coming from inside the house all along. Or rather, that someone had found a way to make sure it could. And so, dear listeners, we emerge from another dark corner of Carman's Crypt. But remember, the horrors you've heard tonight are merely echoes of the terrors that await in the shadows of your mind. If you enjoyed your stay in the crypt, why not invite a friend to join us next week? After all, fear is best when shared. Leave a review if you dare, or share your own tales of terror on my social media, or on my website, carman-carrion.com. Who knows? Your nightmares might just become my next story. Until next time, keep checking under your bed. And remember, in Carman's Crypt, every fear comes to life, and no one is truly safe. Sweet dreams, if you can still sleep at all. Picture, if you will, a child's bedroom door standing ajar in the darkness, that thin barrier between the safety of sleep and the unknown hungers that prowl in the night. In the spaces between lightning flashes, in the silence between thunderclaps, something waits with the patience of a predator and the hunger of the void. Our tale begins with a storm, as so many nightmares do. Tay pressed her face against the cold window, watching the storm clouds roll across the darkening sky like angry fists. The glass fogged with her breath as she counted the seconds between lightning and thunder, the way her teacher had shown them. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. The thunder came faster now, closer. The storm was moving in. At 9 years old, Tay had grown used to the empty house that greeted her each afternoon, the silence that stretched through the rooms like cobwebs, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the kitchen clock that always seemed too loud when she was alone. But Tay knew better than to wait up. Sometimes later meant midnight. Sometimes it meant tomorrow. Sometimes it meant Mom would stumble in with a new boyfriend who smelled like cigarettes and looked at Tay like she was something inconvenient. Honestly, Tay preferred the empty house. She padded to the kitchen in her bare feet, the linoleum cold against her toes. The refrigerator hummed louder as she opened it, surveying the sparse contents. Half a gallon of milk that smelled questionable, some leftover Chinese takeout from 3 days ago, and a bag of baby carrots that had seen better days. Tay grabbed the peanut butter from the counter and a sleeve of crackers from the pantry. Dinner of champions, she thought, echoing something her mother used to say back when she still made jokes. The first drops of rain hit the kitchen window like tiny fists, Tay looked up from her makeshift meal, watching the water streak down the glass in jagged lines. The backyard looked different in the stormlight, darker, more secretive. The old oak tree that usually felt friendly now loomed over the house like a giant with too many arms. She turned on the small television in the living room, more for sound than anything else. The weather report was all urgent voices and red-colored maps. Words like severe thunderstorm warning and seek shelter immediately. Tay turned the volume up, letting the meteorologist's voice fill the spaces between the walls. The sound cut through the weather report like a blade. 3 deliberate raps from the back of the house. The kitchen door that nobody had ever used. Tay's peanut butter cracker stuck in her throat. Dry and suddenly impossible to swallow. She muted the television with trembling fingers. The house fell silent except for the rain, which was coming harder now, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. There it was again. Slow, measured, patient, like whoever was out there had all the time in the world. Tay crept toward the kitchen, her bare feet silent on the carpet, then whisper soft on the linoleum. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she was sure whoever was outside could hear it. Nobody ever used the back door. The mailman came to the front. The pizza delivery guys always rang the doorbell. Even Mom's boyfriends used the front door, usually while leaning on it because they couldn't stand straight. She reached the kitchen just as the knocking came again. More insistent this time. The back door was old, painted white but chipped and weathered. It had a small window at the top, but from where Tay stood, she couldn't see through it. The porch light had been burned out for months. "Hello?" She called out, her voice barely above a whisper. The knocking stopped. Tay held her breath, straining to hear something, anything, over the sound of the rain. A car door? Footsteps? A voice calling back? Nothing. She took a step closer to the door, then another. The old floorboard by the sink creaked under her weight, and she froze. But still, nothing from outside. Maybe it had been a branch from the oak tree blown by the wind. Maybe it had been the storm playing tricks, making her hear things that weren't there. That's when the wind picked up with a howl that made the whole house shudder. The kitchen window rattled in its frame. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. In the darkness, Tay heard the back door's lock click. Not the sound of someone unlocking it from outside. The sound of the old mechanism finally giving up. The tumbler setting into place with a tired sigh. Then came the creak of hinges that hadn't been oiled in years. The door flew open, slamming against the kitchen wall with a sound like a gunshot. Rain lashed through the doorway, soaking the floor as the wind howled through the opening like a wounded animal. Lightning illuminated the kitchen in stark white flashes, turning everything into a scene from a black and white movie. "Mom?" Tay called out, her voice lost in the storm's fury. She rushed to the door, fighting against the wind to pull it closed. Rain soaked her hair and pajamas in seconds, cold droplets stinging her face. The door fought her, as if something were pushing back from the other side. But finally, she managed to force it shut. The lock clicked into place with a satisfying thud, though she noticed it took more effort than usual. Tay stood in the kitchen, dripping and shivering, waiting for her eyes to adjust to the darkness. The power was definitely out. No hum from the refrigerator. No glow from the microwave clock, just the sound of rain against the windows and her own ragged breathing. She needed a towel and a flashlight, and maybe to call Mom, though she probably wouldn't answer. That's when she looked down and saw them. There, pressed into the puddle of rainwater on the kitchen floor, were footprints. Small ones, smaller than her own, but definitely human. They were perfectly formed, showing the outline of toes and the arch of a foot, as if someone had been walking barefoot through the storm. Tay's breath caught in her throat. The prints were too small for an adult, too distinct for a child's shoe. They looked almost delicate, and they were still wet, darker than the surrounding water, as if they had been made just moments ago. She followed them with her eyes, her pulse thundering in her ears. The prints tracked water from the doorway across the kitchen, past the small table where she'd left her crackers, around the corner, into the hallway that led to the bedrooms. But that was impossible. The door had been locked. She had heard it lock, and there was no way someone could have come inside without her seeing them. The kitchen was small, nowhere to hide. Lightning flashed again, throwing wild shadows across the walls. In that brief moment of illumination, Tay saw something that made her blood turn to ice. The footprints didn't stop at the hallway. They continued down the narrow corridor, past her mother's empty bedroom with its unmade bed, past the bathroom with its leaky faucet, and stopped directly in front of her own bedroom door. Her bedroom door, which she always kept closed, was standing slightly ajar. Tay's knees nearly buckled. She grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter for support, her wet fingers slipping on the smooth surface. This couldn't be happening. This had to be a dream, a nightmare brought on by too much caffeine and too many late-night horror movies. But the puddle on the floor was real. The footprints were real, and from the gap in her bedroom door came the softest sound, like someone very small trying not to breathe too loudly. She needed to get out of the house, now. Tay turned toward the front door, but stopped when she saw more footprints leading from the kitchen. These ones were different, longer, wider, with a strange drag mark alongside each step. They went to the living room window, the one that looked out onto the front yard, as if someone had been checking to see if help was coming. Her phone. She needed her phone. It was in her bedroom, plugged in beside her bed. But her bedroom was where the footprints led, where her door stood open like a mouth waiting to swallow her whole. Lightning flickered again, and in that strobing light, Tay saw something that made her stomach drop. The living room window was fogged with condensation, but there was a clear handprint on the glass, small, like the footprints, but pressed against the inside of the window. Someone was in the house with her. Someone who had unlocked her door, walked through her kitchen, and was now hiding in her bedroom. Tay forced herself to move, creeping toward the hallway on legs that felt like water. Each step seemed to echo in the darkness, though she knew she was moving silently. The floorboards didn't creak. She had memorized which ones to avoid during all those nights when she'd snuck to the kitchen for a midnight snack. The hallway stretched before her like a tunnel. Her mother's bedroom door was open, the room beyond a cave of shadows. The bathroom door was closed, but she could hear the steady drip of the leaky faucet, each drop marking time like a countdown. And at the end of the hall, Her bedroom door stood open just enough for someone small to slip through. Tay reached the bathroom and pressed her back against the door. From here, she could see into her bedroom, or at least the slice of it visible through the gap. Her desk, with its pile of homework she'd never finished. The edge of her bed, with its rumpled purple comforter. And there, in the shadows beside her dresser, something that didn't belong. A shape, small and still, but definitely there, about the size of a child, but wrong somehow, too thin, too angular. It stood perfectly motionless, as if it were part of the furniture. Tay's heart hammered so hard she was sure it would give her away. She needed to get to her phone, but it was on the far side of the room, next to the window. She'd have to walk past that thing, whatever it was, to reach it. But what choice did she have? The landline in the kitchen had been disconnected months ago when Mom couldn't pay the bill. Her phone was the only way to call for help. She took a deep breath and stepped into her bedroom. The floorboard creaked. The shape in the shadows turned toward her. What Tay saw in that moment would haunt her for the rest of her life, however long that might be. It was a child, but not quite. The proportions were wrong, the limbs too long and thin. Its skin was pale as moonlight, stretched tight over bones that seemed to bend in impossible directions. But it was the eyes that made Tay's scream stick in her throat. They were black. Not just dark, but truly black. Like looking into deep water at night. And they were hungry. The thing that looked like a child smiled, revealing sharp teeth. "I've been waiting," it said in a voice like a child's, but somehow wrong. Tay lunged for her phone, but the creature moved faster than anything had a right to move. It flowed across the room like liquid shadow, placing itself between Tay and the window. "You live here alone," it said, tilting its head at an angle that made Tay's neck ache in sympathy. "I can smell it on you. The loneliness, the abandonment. It's delicious." "My mom," Tay started, but the creature laughed. "Your mother won't be home tonight, or tomorrow. I've been watching. I know her patterns. She's found someone new to fill her emptiness, and she's forgotten all about you." The words hit Tay like a punch in the stomach, because they were true. All of them. "What do you want?" she whispered. The creature's smile widened. "What I've always wanted. What we all want. To not be alone anymore." It took a step closer, and Tay could see that its feet were bare, the same size as the prints in the kitchen. But there was something wrong with them, too. The toes were too long, the nails too sharp. "I live in the spaces between," it continued, its voice hypnotic, despite its strange quality. "In the cracks where the lonely children fall. I come when they call, even when they don't know they're calling." "I didn't call you," Tay said, backing toward the door. "Didn't you?" The creature tilted its head the other way. "Every night, lying in your bed, wishing for someone to care, someone to notice, someone to stay. I heard you. I always hear them." Tay's back hit the doorframe. The creature was right. She had been wishing for someone, anyone. She'd been so tired of being alone, of taking care of herself, of pretending everything was fine when kids at school asked about her parents. "But you're not," she began. "Not what you expected?" The creature laughed again. "I'm what you need. Someone who will never leave. Someone who will make sure you're never alone again." It took another step forward, and Tay caught a scent that made her stomach turn. Something like old rain and abandoned houses, and things that had been left to rot in dark places. "Of course," it continued, "you'll have to come with me, back to the spaces between, back to where the lonely children go when no one else wants them." "I don't want to go anywhere with you," Tay said, finding her voice again. The creature's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind those black eyes. Disappointment? Anger? "You will," it said with certainty. "They always do, eventually, when they realize that I'm the only one who truly understands, the only one who will never abandon them." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating both of them in stark relief. In that moment, Tay saw something else in the creature's face, a hunger so deep and ancient it made her soul ache. "You can fight it if you want," it said as the thunder rolled over. "It makes it more interesting, but you'll come with me in the end, because I'm offering you exactly what you've been wishing for. A place where you belong, a place where someone wants you." The storm outside seemed to pause, as if the world were holding its breath. Tay stood in her bedroom doorway, facing something that had crawled out of her deepest fears and most desperate wishes. And the terrible thing was, part of her wanted to say yes. Part of her was so tired of being alone, so tired of pretending she didn't need anyone, that the creature's offer sounded almost reasonable. What was the worst that could happen? Could it be worse than this? Than coming home to an empty house every day? Than eating crackers for dinner? Than lying awake at night wondering if her mother would ever truly come home? "I know what you're thinking," the creature said softly. "I can see it in your eyes. The loneliness has been eating you alive, hasn't it? Gnawing at you from the inside, making you feel like you're disappearing a little more each day." Tay's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed, because it was true, all of it. "But I see you," the creature continued. "I want you. I'll never leave you. Isn't that what you've been dreaming of?" The words wrapped around her like an embrace, warm and seductive and terrifying. Tay felt herself taking a step forward, then another. The creature's smile was gentle now, almost motherly. "That's it. Come to me. Let me take away all that pain, all that loneliness. You'll never have to feel abandoned again." Tay was halfway across the room when she heard it, a sound so faint she almost missed it. The soft thud of a car door closing, the crunch of footsteps on the gravel driveway. Mom's car. The creature heard it too. Its head snapped toward the window, and for the first time, it looked uncertain. "She's not supposed to be here," it hissed, and its voice was no longer gentle. "She never comes home this early." But Tay could hear her mother's voice now, talking to someone on the phone as she fumbled with her keys at the front door, probably making excuses to whoever she'd been with, spinning some story about having to check on her daughter. The creature's form began to waver, like heat shimmer on asphalt. "This isn't over," it said, its voice fading. "I'll be back. I'll always be back. The loneliness will call to me again." "Tay?" Her mother's voice echoed through the house. "Tay, honey, are you okay? The power's out on the whole block." The creature was almost gone now, fading like smoke, but its eyes remained, fixed on Tay with an intensity that made her skin crawl.
"I'll be waiting," it whispered, "in the spaces between, when she leaves again, and she will leave again. I'll be waiting."
Then it was gone, leaving only the scent of old rain and the memory of those hungry black eyes. Tay stood in her bedroom, shaking, as she heard her mother's footsteps on the stairs. "Tay? Where are you, sweetheart?" "I'm here, Mom," Tay called out, surprised by how normal her voice sounded. "I'm okay." Her mother appeared in the doorway, backlit by the flashlight in her hand. She looked tired, her makeup smudged, her hair disheveled from the wind. "I was worried about you with the storm," she said, though they both knew that wasn't the real reason she had come home. "Everything okay up here?" Tay nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her mother stepped into the bedroom, and Tay saw her pause, her nose wrinkling slightly. "What's that smell?" "I don't know," Tay said. "Maybe the storm blew something in." They stood there for a moment, mother and daughter, in the darkness of the bedroom. Outside, the storm was beginning to pass, the thunder growing distant. "Well," her mother said finally, "I'm here now. Why don't you come downstairs? We can light some candles and make it cozy." Tay followed her mother out of the room, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. At the top of the stairs, she turned back toward her bedroom. The door was closed now, though she was sure she'd left it open. And there, just visible in the gap beneath the door, was the faint outline of small, bare feet, waiting. And so, dear listeners, we emerge from another dark corner of Carman's Crypt. But remember, the horrors you've heard tonight are merely echoes of the terrors that await in the shadows of your own mind. If you enjoyed your stay in the crypt, why not invite a friend to join us next week? After all, fear is best when shared. Leave a review if you dare, or share your own tales of terror on my social media. Who knows, your nightmares might just become my next story. Until next time, keep checking under your bed. And remember, in Carman's Crypt, every fear comes alive, and no one is truly safe. Sweet dreams, if you can still sleep at all. Margot Sullivan woke to the sound of her own screaming. The echo of it hung in the darkness of her bedroom, a fading wail that seemed to belong to someone else entirely. She pressed her palm against her chest, feeling her heart hammer against her ribs, like something desperate to escape. The sheets beneath her were soaked through with sweat, clinging to her skin like a second layer she couldn't shed. The dream again. Always the same dream. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, squinting against the harsh glow. 3:47 a.m. The hollow hours, her grandmother used to call them. That dead stretch of night when the veil between worlds grew thin as tissue paper. Margot had always thought it was just another one of Nene's superstitions, filed away alongside her warnings about whistling after dark and sleeping with wet hair. But lately, in these fractured hours before dawn, Margot wasn't so sure. 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since the accident at Whispering Pines care home, and still the dreams came every night without fail. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and sat there, head in her hands, trying to separate the real from the imagined. In the dream, she was always back in room 14, standing at Eleanor Vance's bedside. The old woman's eyes would snap open. Not the milky, unfocused eyes of advanced dementia, but sharp and knowing, burning with an intelligence that shouldn't have been there. And then Eleanor's hand would shoot out, her grip impossibly strong, fingers digging into Margot's wrist, hard enough to grind the bones together, her mouth opening to release not words, but a sound, a wet, gurgling shriek that seemed to come from somewhere far deeper than her withered lungs, somewhere below the floor, below the earth, below everything. Margot could still feel the phantom pressure of those fingers on her wrist. When she looked down at her arm in the dim light, she could see the bruises that had never faded. 5 dark ovals like fingerprints pressed into clay. She forced herself to stand, to move, to do something other than sit in the dark replaying it. The floorboards creaked beneath her bare feet as she padded to the bathroom. She didn't turn on the light, couldn't bear to see her own reflection just yet, but splashed cold water on her face, letting it drip down her chin and onto her sleep shirt. The water felt wrong, thicker than it should be. Margot's hands froze halfway to her face. In the darkness, she couldn't see the liquid dripping from her fingers, but she could feel it, viscous, slightly warm, with a faint smell like copper and rot. Her stomach lurched. She fumbled for the light switch. The fluorescent bulb flickered on, buzzing and strobing. In the stuttering light, she saw her hands, clean, wet with nothing but water. The sink was white. The drain was empty, but her reflection in the mirror was smiling, and Margot wasn't. She stumbled backward, hitting the doorframe hard enough to bruise her shoulder. When she looked again, the reflection showed only her own terrified face, just a trick of the flickering light, just exhaustion and stress and the lingering residue of nightmares. Just the accident. That's what they're calling it. A tragic but natural death, the coroner had ruled. Eleanor Vance, 93 years old, severe dementia, multiple organ failure. Nothing unusual about an elderly woman passing in her sleep at a care facility. These things happened. They happened all the time. But Margot had been there when it happened. She had been the one holding Eleanor's hand. And she knew that what she had witnessed was anything but natural. The kitchen light flickered as she turned it on, the ancient fluorescent tube buzzing in protest. Margot's apartment was small, a converted attic space in an old Victorian that had been chopped into rental units sometime in the 70s. She had moved here 2 years ago when she started working at Whispering Pines, drawn by the cheap rent and the proximity to work. Now the cramped rooms felt less like a cozy refuge and more like a coffin stood on end. She filled the kettle automatically, her hands moving through the familiar motions, while her mind stayed trapped 3 weeks in the past. It had been a Tuesday. Margot remembered that specifically because Tuesdays were when the mobile library came, and she'd been planning to help Mrs. Patterson in room 8 pick out new audiobooks. But she'd never made it to the library cart, because halfway through her morning rounds, the call light for room 14 had started flashing. Eleanor Vance wasn't her patient. That wing belonged to Sarah, the senior aide. But Sarah was on break and the light kept blinking, so Margot had gone to check. The room had been dark when she entered, darker than it should have been with the morning sun streaming through the other windows in the hallway. The blinds were drawn, the overhead light switched off, and for a moment, Margot couldn't see anything at all, just the slow beep of the heart monitor and the mechanical wheeze of the oxygen concentrator, and something else, a sound like a whisper, like dozens of voices speaking just below the threshold of hearing. "Mrs. Vance," she called out softly. "Eleanor, are you all right?" A sound from the bed. Not words. Eleanor hadn't spoken coherently in months, but something wet and urgent, like meat being pulled apart. Margot moved closer, reaching for the lamp on the bedside table. The light revealed Eleanor sitting upright in bed, which should have been impossible. The old woman was bedridden, her muscles so atrophied that it took 2 aides to transfer her for bathing. But there she was, spine rigid, head tilted at an angle that made Margot think of a bird examining a worm. And her eyes were wrong. Not milky or unfocused, not even the sharp, knowing eyes from Margot's dreams. They were black, entirely black, pupil, iris, and sclera, all swallowed by a darkness that seemed to move, to swirl, like oil floating on water. "Eleanor?" Margot's voice came out strange, too high, cracking on the second syllable. Eleanor's mouth opened. Her jaw kept opening, unhinging like a snake's, stretching the papery skin of her cheeks until it split at the corners. And from that impossible maw came a sound that Margot would hear in her nightmares for the rest of her life. A sound like 1,000 voices screaming in harmony, like the death rattle of something that had never truly been alive. The kettle screamed. Margot jerked back to the present, her hand flying to her chest. Just the kettle, just water boiling. She was in her kitchen. She was awake. She was fine. She was fine. But when she looked down at her hands, she saw that her nails had gouged deep crescents into her palms without her noticing. Blood welled up in the wounds, dark and thick. She poured the hot water into a mug with trembling hands, not bothering with the tea bag. The warmth seeped into her palms, stinging the cuts, grounding her. This was real. The dream was just a dream, a trauma response, her brain processing what it couldn't understand. Except that wasn't quite true, was it? Because what had happened next in room 14 wasn't something her brain could process, wasn't something any brain should have to hold. Eleanor's hand had shot out with impossible speed, catching Margot's wrist before she could pull away. The old woman's grip was crushing, her fingers digging in until Margot felt the bones grind together, until something popped and sent white-hot pain shooting up her arm. She tried to scream, tried to pull away, but Eleanor held her fast, and then the transfer began. Margot had felt it like a violation, like something reaching into her through the point of contact and rummaging through her insides. Not just her mind, her everything, her memories, her fears, her identity. All of it suddenly laid bare before something ancient and hungry that picked through her like a crow picking through carrion. But worse than that was what flowed back the other way. Eleanor's memories poured into Margot like black water flooding a basement. Not the soft, faded memories of a woman slipping gently into dementia, but the sharp, crystalline memories of a lifetime of carefully hidden horrors. A childhood in a house where the walls wept blood when no one was watching. An adolescence spent learning to quiet the voices that followed her everywhere. Voices that told her to do things, terrible things, and promised relief if she only gave in. A young womanhood of desperate searching, trying to understand what lived inside her, what had always lived inside her, what had been passed down through her bloodline, like a genetic disease. And finally, mercifully, the dementia that had silenced it all. The great gray fog that had descended over Eleanor's mind, and trapped the thing inside her in a prison of forgetting, until Margot's hand had touched hers and given it a way out. The mug slipped from Margot's fingers and shattered on the floor. She didn't move to clean it up. She sat frozen, staring at the spreading puddle, because she could see something in the liquid surface that shouldn't be there. A face. Not her reflection. The angle was wrong for that, but a face looking up at her from the spilled water. Not Eleanor's face, she realized now. Something older. Something that had worn Eleanor like a coat for 93 years and was now trying on Margot for size. The face smiled, showing way too many teeth. Margot squeezed her eyes shut and counted to 10. When she opened them again, the face was gone. Just water on worn linoleum. Just shards of ceramic catching the overhead light. "You're not real," she whispered. "You're not here." But even as she said it, she could feel the pressure building behind her eyes. The familiar sensation she had been experiencing ever since that day in room 14. Like something was trying to look out through her skull. Like her head was a house with windows, and something had moved in uninvited, and was now pressing its face against the glass, eager to see out. The first time she heard the voices clearly, she had been in the break room at work 5 days after the incident. Not whispers anymore, but words, clear as her own thoughts, but distinctly not hers. "Let me see," the voice had said, using her own internal monologue like a ventriloquist uses a dummy. "Let me see through your eyes. Let me taste through your tongue. Let me feel through your skin. It's been so long since I felt anything at all." She had bitten through her lip, trying not to scream. The voices were constant now. They narrated her every action, commented on her every thought, suggested things she tried desperately not to hear. And sometimes, in her peripheral vision, she caught glimpses of what the thing inside her wanted her to see. Dark figures standing in doorways with limbs that bent the wrong way, shadows that moved against the light and left wet trails on the walls, faces pressing through the plaster like drowning victims pressing against ice. Margot hadn't been back to work in 2 weeks. She had stopped answering her phone, stopped checking her email, stopped leaving the apartment. She ordered groceries delivered and left them rotting on the doorstep because the thought of opening the door, of letting in even a sliver of the outside world, filled her with a terror she couldn't name. But the thing inside her was getting stronger. She could feel it now, not just as pressure behind her eyes, but as a presence in her muscles, her bones, her blood. Sometimes her hand would move without her willing it. Sometimes she would find herself standing in front of the mirror, with no memory of walking there, watching her reflection do things she wasn't doing. Smile, wave, press its palm against the glass, like it was trying to reach through. Last night, she'd woken up in the bathtub with the water running, her clothes soaked through, her fingers pruned. She had no memory of getting there, but she had found a word written in the steam on the mirror, in handwriting that wasn't hers. Soon. She forced herself to clean up the broken mug, moving mechanically through the motions. The clock on the microwave read 4:23 a.m. Still hours until dawn. Still trapped in the hollow hours when the veil was thin. She couldn't go back to sleep. Wouldn't even if she could. The dreams were too vivid, too real, and she was increasingly unsure where the dreams ended and waking life began. Instead, she went to the narrow closet in her bedroom and pulled out the box she had been avoiding for days. It was just a shoebox, nothing special, but inside it held everything she'd been able to find out about Eleanor Vance. The diary she had found in Eleanor's admittance file had told her everything she needed to know and everything she didn't want to know. It moves through touch, Eleanor had written in her cramped, faded script. I understand that now. It passed to me from Margaret when she died, and before that it was in Mother, and before Mother it was in Grandmother, going back and back through all the Beecher women to the beginning. We are its vessels, we are its homes, and when we die, it must find a new home or it dies with us. But I have found a way to trap it. The doctors say my mind is going, and they're right, but they don't understand that I'm doing it on purpose. I am building walls inside my head, walls of forgetting, walls that the thing cannot cross. If I can forget hard enough, if I can erase every corridor it might use to find its way out, then maybe it will be trapped forever. Maybe when I die, it will die with me, locked in the prison of my rotting brain. But if someone comes near me, if someone touches me at the end, and if someone reaches across and opens a door, God forgive them. God forgive them for what they'll become. Margot read the words again, but they blurred before her eyes. Not from tears, from something else. That's enough of that, her mouth said. But Margot hadn't told it to speak. Her hand that she wasn't controlling, reached out and crumpled the journal page. Her legs stood her up from the bed. Her feet walked her to the bathroom mirror. No, Margot whimpered, but the word came out small and weak, spoken from somewhere deep inside a body that was no longer entirely hers. No, please. Shh. Her reflection raised a finger to its lips, and Margot felt her own finger rise to mirror the gesture, felt the pressure of it against her mouth. Don't fight. It only hurts when you fight. In the mirror, her eyes were starting to change. The brown of her irises were seeping away, swirling down into darkness like water down a drain. Soon, there would be nothing left. Soon, she would be nothing left. I've been waiting too long, the thing said with her voice, dreamy and content. Eleanor was strong. She kept me locked away for decades. But you... Her reflection smiled, and it was not Margot's smile. It was too wide, too knowing. You're going to be so much more cooperative. I'll fight, Margot managed to force out through lips that didn't want to obey her. I'll do what Eleanor did. I'll forget. Her hand moved before she could stop it, slamming against the mirror hard enough to crack the glass. Pain exploded through her knuckles, and she felt blood begin to flow. But the thing inside her didn't seem to notice or care. Eleanor spent 60 years building her prison. It said, "You don't have 60 years. You don't have 60 days. I've been starving in the dark for so long. And now," her reflection pressed close to the cracked glass, and Margot saw that her eyes were entirely black now, bottomless pits that seemed to drink in the light. Now, I'm going to make up for lost time. Margot tried to scream, tried to run, tried to do anything at all, but her body no longer belonged to her. She could only watch from behind her own eyes as her legs carried her out of the bathroom, as her hand reached for her phone, as her fingers scrolled through her contacts. Your mother, the thing mused, stopped at the entry labeled Mom. She lives alone, doesn't she? Since your father passed away. She must be so worried about you. She'd come running if you called, if you said you needed help. No, Margot pleaded. No, please, not her. It moves through touch, the thing reminded her, and she felt her face stretch into a smile she couldn't stop. And I've been alone for so long, but I won't be alone much longer. Her finger pressed dial. The phone rang once, twice. Margot? her mother's voice thick with sleep and worry. "Mamie, is that you? Are you okay? I've been so worried you haven't called." "Hi, Mom." Her voice came out perfectly normal, warm and loving, utterly Margot. "I'm so sorry I've been distant. I've just been going through something, and I think I really need you right now. Can you come over?" "Of course, baby, of course I can. I'll be there in an hour." "Thank you, Mom. I love you." "I love you too, Mamie." The call ended. Margot felt her phone slip from her fingers, heard it clatter on the floor somewhere far away. Inside her own skull, she screamed and screamed and screamed. But on the outside, her face just smiled that terrible smile, patient and content, as the first gray light of dawn began to creep through the windows. The hollow hours were ending. The veil was thickening, but it didn't matter anymore. The thing inside Margot didn't need doors or veils or the thin places between worlds. It had everything it needed right here, wrapped around it like a warm coat. It had hands that could reach out and touch, and soon it would have so many more. Margot's body walked to the front door and unlocked it. Then it sat down on the couch to wait, hands folded neatly in its lap, eyes fixed on the entrance, with an anticipation that had been building for 60 years. Inside, in the small dark corner of her mind where she was still herself, Margot prayed that her mother would sense something wrong, that she would see the blackness in her daughter's eyes and run, that she would do anything other than reach out to comfort her. But she knew her mother, knew that the first thing she would do when she walked through that door was wrap her arms around her daughter and hold her tight. The thing inside Margot knew it too. It smiled with Margot's face as the minutes ticked by, and somewhere, far away, a car engine started. You've seen it your whole life, not directly, never directly, but you've caught the movement, that flicker of shadow that shouldn't be there, the shape that vanishes the instant you turn your head. Everyone has. We all pretend we don't notice because acknowledging it makes it more real, and making it more real is dangerous. My name is Dr. Thessaly Mordecai, and I'm a neuroscientist specializing in visual perception. I'm writing this because I need someone to know what I've discovered before they come for me. If you're reading this, I'm likely already gone. It started 3 months ago with a patient named Garrison Vole. Garrison came to my clinic complaining of persistent peripheral hallucinations, standard stuff, usually indicating early-stage retinal detachment or temporal lobe issues. But his case was different. The hallucinations were consistent, always the same shape, always just outside his direct vision, and always watching. It's been there since I was a child, he told me during our first session, his hands trembling as they gripped the armrests. I thought everyone had one. My parents told me it was just shadows, just my imagination. But it's gotten closer, Dr. Mordecai. Every year, it gets a little closer. I ran every test. His retinas were perfect. His brain scans showed nothing unusual. I was ready to refer him to psychiatry when he grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "You have one too," he whispered. "I can see it. Right there, behind your left shoulder." I laughed it off. Professional distance. But that night, alone in my apartment, I found myself glancing over my left shoulder, again and again. Nothing there. Of course nothing was there. Garrison stopped coming to appointments. I called his emergency contact, his sister, who told me he'd checked himself into a psychiatric facility upstate. She sounded relieved. "He kept saying it was getting closer," she said. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating, just sat in the corner of his room staring at nothing. I should have let it go. I should have moved on to the next patient. But Garrison had planted something in my mind, and like a seed in fertile soil, it grew. I started researching peripheral vision phenomena. The human eye has a blind spot, a gap in our visual field where the optic nerve connects to the retina. Our brains fill in this gap seamlessly, inventing details to maintain the illusion of complete vision. But what if the brain was filling in the gap with something else? What if it was showing us something that was actually there? I found scattered references in obscure journals. A 1952 Soviet study on peripheral perception, mysteriously discontinued. A Japanese researcher's notes from the 1970s, most of which had been redacted. An Australian sleep study from 2003 that ended abruptly when 2 researchers died in what was ruled a murder-suicide. The common thread? They'd all been investigating the phenomenon Garrison described. Shapes in peripheral vision, consistent shapes, watching shapes. And they'd all stopped their research suddenly. I should have recognized the warning. Instead, I designed an experiment. I recruited 20 volunteers, fitted them with specialized eye-tracking equipment, and had them report any peripheral anomalies during various tasks. For the first week, nothing unusual occurred. Standard visual noise, easily explained by neural misfiring or environmental factors. Then, on day 8, something changed. Perpetua, a graduate student volunteer, called me at 3 a.m., sobbing. "I can't stop seeing it," she said. "Now that I'm looking for it, I can't stop seeing it. It's in every room. It's always there, Dr. Mordecai. How did I never notice it was always there?" By morning, 3 more volunteers had withdrawn from the study. By the end of the week, 12 had dropped out. The remaining 8 reported the same thing. Once you started actively watching for the shape, it became impossible not to see. And worse, it seemed to notice that you were watching. "It moved," one volunteer told me, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "I was focused on it, really trying to see it directly, and it moved. Not away, toward me. Just a fraction, just enough to let me know it knew." I terminated the study. I destroyed the data. I tried to forget. But you can't unknow something once you know it. That's when I started seeing mine. Left peripheral vision, about 7 o'clock position. A dark shape, roughly human-sized but wrong in proportions. Too tall and too thin to be human, with limbs that bent at angles that didn't quite make sense. And yes, it was watching. I could feel its attention like cold breath on the back of my neck. I tried to ignore it. I focused on my work, on normal patients with normal problems, but it was always there. When I drove, I could see it in the back seat through my rearview mirror's edge. When I showered, it stood just beyond the frosted glass. When I tried to sleep, it loomed in the darkness near my bedroom door. The worst part? I started researching historical accounts, folklore, mythology. Every culture has them. The shadow people, the watchers, the things that exist in the spaces we don't quite look at. The Hawaiians called them akualele. The Cree called them mamawatawin. Medieval Europeans spoke of shade stalkers. What if they weren't myths? What if they were reports? I found Garrison. He was still institutionalized, but after I pulled some strings and claimed to be conducting follow-up research, they let me see him. He had aged 20 years in 3 months. His hair had gone completely white. He sat in the corner of his room, facing the walls, because, he explained, it can only approach from behind. I'm not looking at it directly. They're real, he said without preamble. You know that now, don't you? You've been looking, and now you can't stop seeing. What are they? I asked. He laughed. The wrong answer, Doctor. The question is, what are we to them? And I think I know the answer. We're not the observers. We're the observed. We never were the watchers. We're the watched. That doesn't make sense, doesn't it? Think about it. They're always there, just out of direct sight, perfectly positioned to observe us without being seen. What kind of evolutionary advantage would that serve? Unless observation is their purpose. Unless we're... He trailed off, his eyes focusing on something behind me. I refused to turn around. Unless we're what? I pressed. Unless we're the experiment, he whispered. And they're the researchers. I left the facility shaken. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, intensely aware of the shape standing in my peripheral vision near the closet. It had gotten closer. Garrison was right. It was definitely closer than it had been a month ago. I broke every protocol I'd ever learned. I decided to look at it directly. I took a deep breath, stilled myself, and turned my head to face the closet. Nothing. Empty space. But in my peripheral vision, now on my right side, it stood closer than ever. Close enough that I could almost make out details. Something like fingers, something like a face, but hollow where features should be. I tried again, whipping my head around fast, trying to catch it in direct view. Nothing. And yet, there it was, now behind me, even closer. I stood from my bed, dizzy with fear, turning in circles, trying to see it directly. Each time I turned, it shifted to remain in my peripheral vision, and each time it was closer. Finally, exhausted, I stopped moving. It stood less than a foot away now. I could feel it, not heat, but absence of heat, a void of warmth. My breath came out in clouds despite the summer night. And I understood something terrible. It had always been able to get this close. It had been choosing to stay back. But now that I'd been trying to see it, really see it, the rules had changed. Now, it knew I knew. I started searching for information about what happens when you actually see one directly. I found only one account, buried in a declassified CIA document about remote viewing experiments from the 1970s. A test subject claimed to have developed a technique to view the peripheral entities directly through the use of mirrors and carefully timed head movements. The document ended with a single sentence stamped in red. Subject expired during observation. Cause of death, undetermined. Body showed no signs of trauma, disease, or physiological failure. Subject simply ceased to function, as if switched off. I'm writing this now because it's standing right next to me. I can see it in my laptop screen's reflection, a dark smudge that shouldn't exist. I've stopped trying to look at it directly. I understand now that seeing it fully would be the end. Not because it would attack, but because the human mind isn't meant to process what it actually is. Garrison was right. We're not built to see our observers. But I've discovered something else. something that makes this all so much worse. I've been analyzing the data from my terminated study, the information I should have destroyed. I found patterns in the eye tracking data. The volunteers' eyes would make tiny unconscious movements, microsaccades, toward the locations where they reported seeing shapes. This is normal. Our eyes are always moving slightly, processing our environment. But here's what made my blood run cold. The microsaccade showed avoidance patterns. The volunteers' eyes were unconsciously avoiding looking at very specific points in space, points that remained consistent even when they moved, even when they changed positions, as if their brains were working actively to prevent them from seeing something that was objectively there. I plotted these avoided points in three-dimensional space. There were dozens of them in the testing room, dozens of entities, all standing perfectly still, all watching. We'd been surrounded by them the entire time, and our brains had been protecting us by refusing to acknowledge them. I started plotting the points in my apartment. I stopped when I reached 37. 37 entities in my one-bedroom apartment, standing motionless, watching. They've always been there. In your home, in your car, at your workplace. Humanity has existed its entire history, surrounded by silent observers, and our brains have evolved specifically to not see them. Until now. Until we started looking. I can see mine without turning my head now. It's close enough that it's bleeding into my direct vision. A dark smudge I can't blink away. I think I'm beginning to understand what it looks like, and the knowledge is breaking something in my mind. It's not that it's ugly or monstrous. It's that the shape of it doesn't conform to the laws of physics as we understand them. It exists in more dimensions than we can process, and seeing it is like trying to pour an ocean into a teacup. My nose started bleeding an hour ago. It hasn't stopped. I need you to understand something crucial. This isn't a warning to stop looking. It's too late for that. If you've read this far, you're already looking. You've already noticed the shape that's always been there, just out of direct sight. You can't unknow this now. They don't move when we're not looking. They move when we almost look. Garrison called me an hour ago. I don't know how he got a phone. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. I finally understand, he said. They're not watching us to harm us. They're watching us because something else is coming, and they're checking to see if we notice. They're measuring how aware we are. And Dr. Mordecai, I think we failed the test. I think by finally seeing them, we've proven that we're not ready for what they've been protecting us from. What are they protecting us from? I asked. The line went silent for a long time. Then, turn around, Dr. Mordecai. Turn around and look at what's standing behind the ones who watch. I didn't turn around. Garrison screamed, not in pain, in recognition. The call ended. The facility called me this morning. Garrison was found dead in his room. No marks, no trauma. He simply stopped living. His eyes were wide open, staring at the corner of his ceiling. I'm losing time. I'll be sitting at my desk and suddenly hours have passed. I can't help but see it. Isn't moving, but reality bends around it, like light around a black hole. There's something else here now, something behind the watcher, something that makes the entity that's been observing me seem small and insignificant by comparison. I can't see it even peripherally, but I can feel it. It's vast. It's old. And it's noticed that I've noticed the watchers. The watchers were never the danger. They were the barrier. They were standing between us and something else. And by learning to see them, we've created gaps in their coverage, holes in their protective observation. Something is coming through those holes. I can hear it breathing. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You're seeing them now too, aren't you? The shapes in your peripheral vision. You always have been, but now you can't stop noticing them. And soon, like me, you'll see what's behind them. Don't turn around. Whatever you do, don't turn around. It's standing right behind you. It's always been standing right behind you. And now that you know it's there, it knows you know. It's reaching out. I can see its hands in the reflection on my screen. It has too many fingers. They're getting closer to my shoulder. Once it touches me, I think I'll understand everything. I think I'll see what Garrison saw in his final moment. I think I'll see what we really are, what we've always really been. The watched, the measured, the specimens. I don't want to understand, but the fingers are touching my shoulder now, and I can feel my mind expanding to accommodate the knowledge. And it's too much. It's too vast. It's too...
And so, dear listeners, we emerge from another dark corner of Carman's Crypt. But remember, the horrors you've heard tonight are merely echoes of the terrors that await in the shadows of your mind. If you enjoyed your stay in the crypt, why not invite a friend to join us next week? After all, fear is best when shared. Leave a review if you dare, or share your own tales of terror on my social media, or on my website, carman-carrion.com. Who knows? Your nightmares might just become my next story. Until next time, keep checking under your bed. And remember, in Carman's Crypt, every fear comes to life, and no one is truly safe. Sweet dreams, if you can still sleep at all.